Imagine an election for President of the United States. It is the first Tuesday in November, late in the evening. All votes have been cast and all but 4 counted. These final 4 votes are in Ohio. From the other states, the incumbent Democrat has won 266 electoral votes. His Republican challenger holds 254. It takes 270 to win. So the candidate who takes Ohio's 18 votes will be elected president. In Ohio, the count stands at 3 million votes apiece exactly. A tie. About the 4 uncounted voters, we know only this. Voter A is female. Voter B is African American. Voter C is male. And voter D is white. Now, it is also true that voter A is an oil company executive, that voter B is Mormon, that voter C is gay, and that voter D is an Oberlin College sociology professor with, some say, Marxist inclinations. But we know none of this. We do, however, have one other piece of evidence. A Monmouth University scientific poll taken 2 weeks before Election Day. Respondents were asked, if the election for president were today, would you vote for the Republican or Democrat? This was the result. Of female voters, 49% answered for the Democrat, 45% for the Republican. Among male voters, the advantage was to the Republican, 51% to 40%. White voters also favored the Republican, 57% to 38%. Non-white voters preferred the Democrat, 82% to 6%. So who will win? Clearly, on our evidence, we should predict a tie. Arguments consist of claims, evidence, and warrants. A claim answers the question, what are you asking me to believe? Evidence answers the question, what are you giving me to go on? A warrant answers the question, how does this evidence support this claim? In our example of an imagined presidential election, the claim was that in Ohio, the result would likely be a tie. The evidence consisted of a few facts about some voters and a poll. In making our prediction, this warrant is called an inference from sign. In an inference from sign, one fact or set of facts is said to indicate another. Here's another example. Some blue sky mornings, as I take my walk, I think to myself, I guess it's going to rain. The evidence for this is smell, an odor like rotten eggs. Being from the South, I am familiar with the smell, and being from Little Rock, I know the source, the Pine Bluff paper mill, 40 miles away. The smell is sulfur dioxide, an ingredient in making paper. Too bad it stinks. Growing up, when we caught the whiff, someone would groan preemptively, I smell Pine Bluff. And someone old and wise might nod and add, I guess it's going to rain. Not a cloud in sight. But often enough, given a day or two, rain it did. Between that smell and rain, there did and does seem to be a correlation. Now, seeming correlations can be tricky. We humans tend to see them where they don't exist. For example, take my hat. I wore this hat to a recent football game in Little Rock between my Arkansas Razorbacks and Louisiana Monroe, Goliath versus David, with, unfortunately, the same result. Louisiana Monroe won with a touchdown on the last play. Then, last week, the Razorbacks played in Little Rock again against Ole Miss. Again, I wore the hat. Ole Miss won with a field goal on the last play. Is there a correlation between my headwear and these last play Little Rock Razorback defeats? Looking ahead next year to a game in Little Rock, if I'm wearing my hat and the score is tied, 3 seconds on the clock, should I infer that the Razorbacks will lose? Of course not. There is no meaningful relation between my hat and the Razorbacks' performance. Now, excuse me for a moment while I go and burn my hat. I'm back and feeling much better. In considering inferences from sign, we should ask 4 questions. 1. Is there in fact a correlation? 2. Are we confusing sign with cause? 3. Have we missed a sign? And 4. Have we drawn the right conclusion? 1. Is there in fact a correlation between, for example, that smell and rain? In debate, we often prove correlations with statistics. In this instance, however, we have something even better, an explanation. Look at a map. Pine Bluff lies southeast of Little Rock. Looking further south, you'll notice the Gulf of Mexico. In Arkansas, a southeast wind brings warm, moist air up from the Gulf, raising the probability of rain and thunderstorms. So there is a correlation, and we are justified in linking the evidence of smell to a claim about the possibility of rain. 2. Are we confusing sign with cause? Watch out for this, because it is often done even by people who are not superstitious. So repeat 3 times after me. Correlation does not imply causation. Correlation does not imply causation. Correlation does not imply causation. Sometimes we might wish it did. If only it were true that by making paper in Pine Bluff, we were making rain for Little Rock. We had a terrible drought this summer that we could have ended just by cranking up the mill. But say it with me. Correlation does not imply causation. 3. Have we missed a sign? It wasn't our fault, but in our election example, we missed several. For purposes of predicting votes, I would think that a person's teaching sociology at Oberlin would tell us more than their being white. And 4. Have we drawn the right conclusion? Consider 2 examples, both politically contentious. We know that in New York City, young black and Hispanic men are much more likely than young whites to be arrested. From this sign, some will infer racial discrimination by the police department. Is that the right conclusion? By way of rebuttal, others argue that the arrest statistics may signify a series of underlying factors along lines like this. A history of economic hardship among Hispanics and African Americans, contributing to breakdown in their families, giving rise to teenage gang involvement, leading to criminal behavior resulting in arrests. The signs are clear. The inferences, which are disputed, require additional supporting evidence. A second example. We know that schools across the country show wide disparities in results from student testing. In one school, the average ACT score might be 18, while in another it is 10. From this sign, some would infer differences in the quality of teaching, good teaching in the first school, bad teaching in the second. Is this the right conclusion? By way of rebuttal, others argue that the test results may signify a wider set of factors: degree of parental involvement, facilities, student and teacher safety, or even too much community emphasis on football. It may turn out that even the best teacher cannot get that jock to crack a book. Again, the signs are clear. The inferences, which are disputed, require additional supporting evidence. Those, then, are our 4 tests for inferences from sign. In concluding, I will tell you that at the source of Christian faith, sign inferences abound. In Matthew, Jesus uses one to answer messengers from John the Baptist. When, at John's behest, they ask, "Are you the one who is to come, or are we to expect some other?" he answers, "Tell John what you hear and see. The blind see, the lame walk, lepers are made clean, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the poor are hearing good news." By these signs, John may infer the answer to his question. In Luke, a man asks Jesus, "Who is my neighbor?" Jesus answers with a story. A man set out on the road to Jericho. He fell among thieves who robbed, beat, stripped, and left him by the road for dead. After others passed him by, along came a Samaritan, who comforted the man and tended his injuries as best he knew how. He gave him clothes and paid for his care through a period of convalescence. By these signs, Jesus expands our understanding of the word neighbor. Finally, in Mark, Jesus tells a man his sins have been forgiven. This assurance sends a murmur through the crowd. By what right, they object, can Jesus say this? Who can forgive sins but God? The man is also paralyzed, lying on a pallet. In the Bible, we read what happens. Jesus, perceiving in his spirit that they thus questioned within himself, said to them, "Why do you question thus in your hearts? Which is easier, to say to the paralytic, 'Your sins are forgiven,' or to say, 'Rise, take up your pallet and walk'? But that you may know that the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins," he said to the paralytic, "I say to you, rise, take up your pallet, and go home." And he rose, and immediately took up the pallet, and went out before them all. If you like inferences from sign, you're going to love the Bible. From sign.